Today, he defends the Second Amendment as a prominent leader in the United States Senate. 2 years ago, when NRA members were fighting the biggest assault on our freedom in 2 decades, he stood with us on the front lines. So please join me in welcoming a great ally and great friend of gun owners, United States Senator Marco Rubio.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here. Someone asked me, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Nashville to an event where you're the least likeliest place to get mugged this weekend is here. Safest room in the country. I'm honored to be with you here today. I think we're joining together at what I believe is a turning point for our nation on many different issues. National security is one of them, and the Second Amendment is the other. What I wanted to focus my remarks on today is at the point in which these two issues actually intersect. Now, we've all heard it said that the usefulness of the Second Amendment has run its course, that the purpose it served in the days of muskets no longer applies in the days of AR-15s. But the genius of our founders doesn't have an expiration date. It's actually like wine. It gets more valuable with the passage of time. I want you to think about this. No politician would argue our First Amendment right to free speech is less valuable in the digital age than it was in the days of pen and paper. And therefore, I believe it is equally outrageous for anyone to argue that our Second Amendment right is less valuable today. The right to self-defense This basic right to self-defense, it has not evolved, but the threats that require us to exercise it certainly have. Today, we face shifting perils of domestic crime. We face the evolving threat of radical Islam, and we face the occasional acts of cruelty that defy categorization, that lack an agenda of terrorism but transcend the label of crime, that are executed by sick minds and sick hearts, people willing to target the most vulnerable and innocent among us without a cause, without warning, without mercy. All these dangers are real. All of them can be overcome. But they cannot be overcome by a government focused more on restricting our law-abiding citizens than on restricting our enemies. They can only be overcome by American strength. And American strength requires our leaders and presidents who execute their responsibility to protect our nation, and a people who exercise their right to protect themselves. Everyone in this room understands a simple fact that our current president does not. Strong defenses, both on the national and the personal level, are a means of preventing violence, not of promoting it. Weakness, on the other hand, is the friend of danger, and weakness is the enemy of peace. President Obama has been a weak president. The only thing President Obama has strengthened over the last 6 years has been his own unlawful power. To guarantee America's strength in this century, we need a new kind of president. One who starts doing what he's constitutionally required to do and stops doing what he is constitutionally forbidden to do. So let's start with what our presidents are required to do. Of all the duties of the President of the United States, our founders made clear which one comes first. The position is not described as the taxer-in-chief or the regulator-in-chief, and it's certainly not described as the golfer-in-chief. Now I get a letter from the Golf Association. They always get mad when I say that. That's all right. It's described first and foremost as the commander-in-chief. And yet President Obama has treated this duty like an afterthought. He entered office believing that the United States was too engaged in the world in too many places, that we told people what to do too often, and that's why they resented us. That if we just took a step back, become a junior partner on the global stage, allow other countries to take the lead, that things would be better for America and the world. But sadly, it doesn't work like that. The hard truth is that when America steps back, there simply is no other nation willing or able to fill the void of global leadership. And the result is chaos. Chaos that manifests itself in regional turmoil, violent extremism, and danger to our people and our global economy. Anyone who seeks the presidency must recognize that in this century, there is no such thing as a remote problem. Our economy is increasingly global, and our people are increasingly bound to the affairs of the world. A threat a hemisphere away, such as ISIS, can become a threat down the street almost overnight. Anyone who advocates averting our eyes from the dangers of the world must explain, against 6 years of counter-evidence, how this would lead to a safer America, because it will not. Of the many threats we face today, one of the greatest is the changing nature of Islamic extremism. An enemy that despises us not because of what we do, but because of who we are. And terrorists set their sights not just on our military men and women, but also on our cities and our towns. They don't just focus on sending attackers from abroad, but on recruiting those who will attack us from within. And yet our president refuses to look the threat of radical Islam in the eye and call it by its name. Even in January, when terrorists stormed the offices of Charlie Hebdo in Paris, murdering 11 and injuring 11 others, he still refused to mention radical Islam and instead took the first chance he got to tell Christians not to get on their high horse in condemning it. Let me be clear with you about something. When we talk about radical Islam, we are talking about an ideology that millions of peace-loving Muslims join us in condemning. We are talking about an ideology that prompts children to be buried alive, and women to be enslaved, and young girls to be ritually abused, and innocent people to be executed at their desks for having the audacity to exercise the human right of free speech. And so, Mr. President, if condemning that puts us on a high horse, I suggest we saddle up. And that attack in Paris was not isolated. Last year, an attack at a Jewish museum in Brussels left 4 people dead. In September, after the beheading of an American journalist by the Islamic State, a woman was beheaded at work in Oklahoma. Then there was a car attack in Quebec, a shooting at Canada's Parliament in Ottawa, an assault with a hatchet in New York City, an attack at a synagogue in Israel, a deadly hostage crisis at a cafe in Australia, all of them tied to Islamic fundamentalism. And those are only the beginning. Of course we remember the tragedy at the Boston Marathon 2 years ago this week. But other threats are foiled regularly in America. You know that in the last year we have arrested more than 20 of our own people for attempting to join ISIS or other terrorist groups, many of them with the goal of bringing that terror back to our soil. Radical Islam is a serious threat around the world and here at home. But as long as we have a president who does not do what he's supposed to do, our people have cause to fear. But if we had a president who did what he's supposed to do, our people would have no cause for fear. For in the majority of instances, a well-funded, well-equipped military, an adept intelligence community, and a well-trained law enforcement agency will stop radicals and other enemies dead in their tracks, often literally. But there are some instances when our enemies are undetectable, untraceable, and their deeds unpredictable. When homegrown terrorists lash out in lone wolf attacks, when unstable individuals, sometimes mentally ill, sometimes evil, attempt atrocities against innocent Americans, and most commonly when the innocent are the targets of unpredictable domestic crime, with only themselves for protection until the police can be called. The framers of our Constitution had a plan for these instances too. And that brings me to what the president is constitutionally forbidden to do. The presidential oath of office contains no asterisks. It contains no fine print. Our president swears to preserve, protect, and defend the entire Constitution of the United States, not just the parts he likes. Thanks to the Second Amendment, the President has no authority to limit the strength of our law-abiding citizens. The President has no authority to tell a father he cannot own a gun to defend his family and property. The President has no authority to tell a young woman she is better off without the protection of a firearm. The President has no authority to tell a hunter, a sportsman, or any law-abiding American what kind of weapon is right for him or her. And it is bad enough that this administration has attempted these very things in routine moments. For example, with the failed ammunition ban earlier this year. But it is even worse when the President has wielded human tragedy in an attempt to subvert our rights. The sins of the evil do not justify restricting the rights of the good. In fact, the sins of the evil make those rights more critical. Because when our enemies come now, they no longer come with 6-round revolvers. Stricter gun laws will never deter criminals and terrorists. If laws stopped murderers, there wouldn't be murderers in the first place. In fact, 42% of the perpetrators of mass shootings already possess their guns illegally. Those who will be stopped are the law-abiding targets of these crimes. It's very simple. The stricter the gun control laws, the larger the advantage we hand to the would-be attackers. And the more gun-free zones we establish, the more tempting targets we've created. Now, some will be skeptical about what I just said. Maybe not any of you in this room, but some. So I ask you this question. The next time you drive through your neighborhood, count how many of your neighbors have signs announcing that their home is armed with a security system. And then I want you to compare that to how many of them have signs declaring their home to be a gun-free zone. To our people, the risk of announcing our lack of preparedness is obvious. So why don't our leaders in Washington understand that? Whatever their miscalculation is, it's a risk to all of us, including Washington itself. Washington, D.C. makes a tempting target for enemies, both foreign and domestic. And yet nowhere in this country are the gun laws more restrictive than in D.C. Our capital city is not just a location of government leaders. It's filled with visiting school students and touring families. And it is inexcusable that in Washington, the seat of our people's power, the constitutional right to bear arms is constantly in jeopardy. And that's why I took action last month to roll back D.C.'s restrictive gun laws. My legislation would allow D.C.'s law-abiding residents and visitors firearms to protect their homes, their businesses, and their families. This legislation will bring strength to D.C. on the citizen level. But Washington needs strength in another sense as well. And the strength I'm talking about won't come from a bill. It will come from a president who understands the world is at its safest when America's at its strongest. It will come from a president who understands that America's at its strongest when our people are at their freest. And it will come from a president who understands that he has a duty that must never be neglected, and our people have a right that must never be denied. So let me close because I'm running out of water. Let me close with a look ahead. So I began with my remarks saying our nation has reached a turning point on many issues. I believe that fact is beyond debate. I think what's yet to be determined is which direction will it turn. Everything that's at stake in our next election, from the future of the Second Amendment to the security of our people in a global world, to the financial opportunities available to everyone, it all combines together into a challenge that I believe will define our generation. And that is the future of the American dream. My parents came to America in 1956 with little more than their dreams of a better life. But over time, my dad working as a bartender in a hotel and my mother working as a maid, a stock clerk, a cashier at Kmart, they were able to achieve the American dream. Because the real American dream isn't about how big your house is. The real American dream is not about how many things you own on the day you die. The real American dream is about having a job that pays a comfortable wage. It's about raising your family in a safe neighborhood and having the right to defend them. It's about seeing your children earn a good education. It's about having the freedom to do the things you value with the people that you love. It's about retiring with dignity after a long life of hard work. And the American dream is about one more thing more than any other. It's about giving your children the chance to do the things you never could, go to the places you could never go, and open the doors that were closed to you. My parents achieved this dream, but many people today find it slipping out of reach. And that's because our world and our economy are pushing the boundaries of the 21st century. But our government remains stuck in the 20th century. The question facing our generation is this: will we reclaim the American dream for all Americans by reforming and modernizing Washington, by applying the genius of our founding to the challenges of our time? Or will you and I become the first generation in history to leave our children worse off than ourselves? That is the question that will define this generation. And I, for one, have an answer in mind. And so in just 3 days in Miami, I will announce whether I will run for president, for re-election to the Senate, or for commissioner of the National Football League. And the NFL commissioner is probably a little too powerful for me, so we may have to. But regardless of what I decide to do about my future, the upcoming election will not be about any one person. For no problem facing our nation can be solved by any single person working alone. And that's why I'm so grateful for the work each of you and all NRA members are doing every single day. The American people will never achieve the American dream if they are not safe. Living in a safe neighborhood, going to work in a safe office, going about our daily lives without fear for ourselves or our children. These are the goals fundamental to the American dream. And a strong Second Amendment will ensure a strong America for your family, for my family, and for every family in this nation. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for your work. God bless our country. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.